Hier ist literaturlaunch.eu. Heute mit. Ich sitze hier bei der Frankfurter Buchmesse vor dem Autor Robert Harris. Er hat das Buch geschrieben, Der zweite Schlaf. Und meine Frage, die ich mir als erstes gestellt habe, war, wie kommt man auf diese Idee zu diesem Buch?
So, being here on the Frankfurt Book Fair, speaking to the author Robert Harris about the book The Second Sleep, the first question that came up was, how did this idea come up for the book, so the whole setting and everything?
I wrote 4 books set in ancient Rome, 3 about Cicero and 1 about Pompeii. And during the course of that, I read a lot of archaeological books, visited archaeological sites, read scholarship about piecing together what had happened to these places, why the Roman Republic collapsed, why Pompeii was destroyed. And the idea began to grow in my head that it would be quite funny to have archaeologists and scholars digging into the past, and then gradually the reader realizes that the ruined civilization they're investigating is ours. And I think that was the start of it. And that gave me 2 questions. What would they discover? And what had happened to our world that it had collapsed? And that was the origin of the novel. 6 or 7 years ago, I had that idea.
Was mich am Anfang sehr irritiert hat, war die Zeitumstellung. Also es war ja die Jahreszahl 1466 und im Endeffekt spielt es ja in unserer Zukunft. Wie kam es zu dieser Idee, dass auf einmal man das als mehr oder weniger ein Reset herstellt?
So what was a bit irritating in the beginning was that it was in the year of 1466, but obviously not our 1466, but a different 1466, being caused of being in the future. So how did you come to the idea to change the way of counting the years?
Well, I wanted to, obviously I needed to set a book far enough in the future that our world would just be ruins, buried ruins. So I chose about 800 years as being about the distance. And in my view, the world would then have reverted to something more like the Middle Ages. It would be a world of horseback and candlelight and churches. My idea basically was that the collapse of our civilization around 2025 would in time, the church would say it had been forecast in the book of Revelation in the Bible. And they would reset the calendar to 666, which is the number of the beast of Revelation. And so the calendar restarts. So 800 and something years in the future would be 1468. And so that's how that came about. And the book plays a sort of game with the reader at the beginning. Unfortunately, everybody who listens to this broadcast or reads the newspapers about the books knows what the twist is now, but I suppose that's inescapable.
Also, was mich auch sehr verwundert hat, war, dass die Kirche wieder erstarkt wird oder beziehungsweise die Kirche als Mittelpunkt hingestellt wird. Wie schnell war das klar, auch beim Schreibprozess oder auch schon davor?
What was a bit surprising was the re-strengthening of the churches, and that they really take control about everything again. Was it kind of clear from the beginning, or did that just turn out during the writing process?
I think that became clear to me from the beginning because, first of all, physically, the churches would stand because of their construction. They're likely to last far longer than modern buildings. So the churches would be there, and people, after this calamity, would, I think, congregate in the churches for comfort and for shelter, community, for safety. And then I think the churches would come to offer an explanation for what had happened. I mean, why have the churches lost their hold on modern life? It's because of science and technology, reason. We no longer believe it. But if all this world of the digital internet and so on was destroyed, if electricity ceased to exist, I think people would go back to the old ways and old faiths that would fill up the gap that was been removed by the loss of all those things. And, look around now. There's so many conspiracy theories and so much superstition, so much challenging of fact. I think there's a huge capacity in human beings to want to believe something other than the world, the plain physical world around them. So I really feel that religion, organized religion, would step back again and become a force in the country again.
Wie kam es eigentlich ja zum einzelnen Titel, also der zweite Schlaf, und warum ist es immer wieder so präsent? Aber ich zum Beispiel kannte den zweiten Schlaf gar nicht.
The title, The Second Sleep, actually, for us, it was an unknown phrase. How did you come to this idea? So, yeah.
When I started researching the book, realizing that I had to go back to pre-industrial civilization, I discovered that in pre-industrial times, people used to go to bed much earlier, and they used to have this thing called the second sleep. You would go to sleep from about sort of 9 o'clock in the evening till about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you would wake up. People used to wake up, and rather than stay in bed, they would get up and they would maybe eat something or do a household job or even socialize, and then go back to bed for the second sleep or morning sleep. And I think that's a natural human pattern of sleep. In fact, the scientists now recognize that we tend to sleep in cycles, the 3 or 4 hours each. And in the past, that people used to go along with it. Whereas we try and stay in bed. And I thought that if you took industrial society away again, we would go back to sleeping like that. And I found it a rather beautiful kind of metaphor. That the world had gone back to sleep again, and I thought it was just a rather intriguing title for the novel.
Sehr interessant. Wie ist es eigentlich, etwas zu beschreiben, was im Endeffekt im 16. Jahrhundert stattfindet, weil da ist ja so diese Mechanismen, diese mechanischen Webstühle zum Beispiel, die der eine hat, gibt es ja so ab dem 16. Jahrhundert, Mitte des 16. Jahrhunderts, und das mehr oder weniger auch als Zukunft zu beschreiben.
How does it feel to describe situations which are from their type more situated in the 16th century, 15th, 16th century, but placed in the future, so kind of tweaking the time? How does that feel?
It feels like coming home in a strange way, because my first novel, Fatherland, also had an imagined past and a conjectured future. It was set in the past in 1964, but that was 1964 was sort of in the future after Germany had supposedly won the war. So but that was playing around with time in a similar way, and I think that I enjoy that imaginative leap. I've tried to create in this novel a very real landscape and world of this southwestern England, and this tiny village and this small town and the deserted moors and a concrete structure. No one knows what it's about. I tried to make it physically very real. There's nothing fantastic about it, but one has just adjusted time, and so you hope that the reader falls into this imagined world, and that it's disorientating. And I've had a great deal of pleasure doing that, working on several levels at once, setting it in the future, trying to think of us as the past, playing around with that concept. It made it quite a complicated book to write and hold in my head, but I enjoyed doing it. I thought it was something. I thought it was something new to try.
Was stehe ich gerade. Wie ist es, etwas zu beschreiben, wie ist es, etwas so eine Tiefe zu geben, also einem Buch so eine Tiefe zu geben und das nur im Anführungszeichen auf 400 Seiten, weil werden ja viele Themen angepackt in diesem Buch und andere Autoren brauchen dafür 1000 Seiten oder 1200 Seiten. Sie schaffen es in 400 Seiten und es ist einfach nur spannend und schnell und einfach zu lesen.
How tricky is it to get everything into depth so fascinatingly within 400 pages, whereas some other authors might have needed 1000 or more. So how tricky, because it seems to be really fascinating to get everything condensed like that.
I do think that if I always like to try and condense as much as possible into a book, that is constrict the time frame. So have a book that really ranges across centuries, but takes place itself only over 5 or 6 days and only in one very small location, and trying to focus everything is a way that I like to work. You're right. I could have conceived of the whole world as in a sort of epic series of novels and done it in that way. But to be honest, once I've created the world and the situation, I want to explore it once. I don't really want to live in this world for year after year. I did, just as soon as the book was finished, before it was published, it was bought by a television company who make Downton Abbey, oddly enough, and they want to make several series based on the world of the book, taking it beyond where I've imagined it. And I think that's quite an interesting idea, and I look forward to seeing what they might come up with. But maybe that will be a better way of exploring the world than for me to do it.
Wie kam es zu diesem Held Fairfax?
Okay, how did you come up with Fairfax as a special hero in the book?
He's a character who, rather like the policeman in Fatherland. I mean, I wanted someone who was a part of the ruling elite, if you like. He's a priest at a time when the church is all powerful. He's young. He's led a very sheltered life. Because he seems to be a loyal servant of the church, he's given this job by the Bishop of Exeter to go to this remote valley in a small village and bury the dead priest and then return. But when he gets there, he starts to realize things and becomes curious. And that character is a sort of figure I've written about before. Someone who's an insider and an outsider, someone who I find quite an attractive figure, who explores the world and the reader explores it with him. And he suffers a crisis of faith. His life is turned upside down in a fairly short space of time. And it seemed to me that he was the best way of telling the story. I did think of telling the story from the other principal character's point of view, that of the antiquarian, the old archaeologist, but it seemed to me that he would know too much from the start. The idea of having someone who knew little to begin with, I thought was the best way to tell this tale.
Wobei, also die eigentliche Heldin für mich persönlich ist eigentlich Sarah. Sie ist eine richtig taffe, starke Frau, eine total authentische Persönlichkeit, finde ich.
For him, it seemed, or it felt that Sarah was also one of the main heroes, actually, because being a very tough and strong woman and really doing something, taking up things, so also a very strong one. So
Yeah, Sarah is one of my favorite of the women characters I've created in the novels, because I think that she's, as you say, she really changes the whole story. She's the driving force in many ways. And yet I hope that she's quite a plausible figure. I mean, you know, she's quite human. I felt strongly that she was quite alive in my head. She's the widow living in a huge house, which is falling down around her ears, and all her husband has left her is a lot of old broken glass, which seems to have no value or meaning until my priest hero comes along and they compare notes, and suddenly they realize they may be sitting on this extraordinary, not just treasure, but gateway to the past, to our time. And the conjunction of the two characters is something I enjoyed writing, and I'm glad that you feel that about her, because I certainly felt she was a vibrant figure.
Gibt es in naher Zukunft Themen, die Sie nochmal bewegen oder die Sie nochmal literarisch anfassen werden?
So in the nearer future, are there specific topics you feel like starting to write about?
Yes, I have. I've got 3 or 4 ideas, and I would like to start writing a new book in January. I have quite an idea I've been playing around with for several years of a novel set in the war, Second World War again, in 1944, and I think that I might try and write that next. One of the pleasures of my writing life has been to move around from period to period, the Roman era, France at the end of the 19th century, the war, or a novel like this set in a kind of a fantasy world in a way. And I have a great admiration for Stanley Kubrick, the film director, that he did books set in the First World War, the Vietnam War, fantasy, science fiction, like satire like Dr. Strangelove, 2001, Barry Lyndon. I'm not comparing myself to him, but I think that taking what your interests and your vision and applying it to different eras and styles is something I greatly admire, and that's what I want to carry on doing for as long as I can.
Ja, da bleibt mir nur noch eins übrig, mich zu bedanken für so eine intensive und schöne Story, und ja, mehr bleibt mir nichts übrig zu sagen.
So then the last thing we can do is thank you very much for the good interview, for the good stories, for the intense explanations and stories. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Been my pleasure. Thanks.
Das war's für heute. Bis bald bei der Literaturlaunch.eu. Euer Markus.